all, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Michael Lewis, and I am the chairperson of the Jewish Federation of Raleigh Cary's new Jewish Business Leader Affinity Group. On behalf of today's Fireside Chat Planning Committee, welcome to our kickoff event. Today's discussion is the first of many future events ahead, and we would like to thank our speaker, Natalie Rothman of Advanced Auto Parts, and Jonah Kaplan of ABC 11 for being here with us today. We would also like to take a moment to acknowledge and thank the sponsors of this event: Active Healthcare, Bizcom Global, Postal Solutions, Skolnick and Company, and Tudor Financial Advisors. Before we begin, the Jewish Business Leaders, aka JBL Affinity Group, is growing and seeking new members. The JBL is for Jewish business leaders who own or lead a business in the Raleigh-Cary area. Our group's goals are to identify and share with our community high-level speakers, meet for networking events virtually and hopefully soon in person, and create a mentor-mentee program, among other possible community contributions. Should you have interest in any of these offerings, have a speaker suggestion, want to join the JBL, or to become a sponsor, please contact me to learn more. My information will be shared with you by email after the webinar concludes today. Now, please allow me to share with you a little bit about today's hosts for the Fireside Chat. Jonah Kaplan is ABC 11's Eyewitness News political and investigative reporter. He has appeared on ABC, NBC, and CBS News, as well as CNN and MSNBC. Jonah is a two-time Emmy nominee and was named TV Reporter of the Year in 2018 by the Radio Television Digital News Association of the Carolinas. In 2013, the Region Communications Council recognized Jonah with the Wilbur Award for his reporting and producing a 5-part series called Journey to Jerusalem, an award he shared with the late 60 Minutes correspondent Bob Simons. Take it away, Jonah.
Thank you very much, Michael, and good morning to everyone, and it's really wonderful to be with you. And before I introduce Natalie, I just want to say how awesome it is to get to interview somebody who's not a political figure, where I don't necessarily have to be objective. I can say she's incredibly awesome. I like her. I support everything she does. And so what a really breath of fresh air this conversation is going to be as well. Because obviously we're in the thick of everything, and there's so much going on, and the news cycle is never ending and overwhelming, but it's engaging. But so much of our life also happens outside the political arena, and there is so much movement, and there's so much progression, and there's so much growth, and there's so much we can learn from the private sector and from real pioneers and some really just such esteemed executives and professionals like Natalie, that it is really great. So thank you all for doing this. Thank you for the JBL for putting this together. Natalie Rothman, as I said, successful corporate executive, more than 20 years of experience working in consumer products, food service, beauty, retail, and auto. Natalie has served as the Executive Vice President, Chief Human Resources Officer for Advanced Auto Parts since May 2016. That's Advanced Auto Parts, not O'Reilly, not Napa, Advanced Auto Parts since May 2016, and as a direct report to the CEO. As a member of Advanced Turnaround Team, Natalie has focused on recruiting top talent to key leadership positions while having a positive impact on the company's 88-year-old culture. Her focus on inclusion and diversity, improving the team member experience, and building a stronger employer brand has led to reduced employee turnover, improved organizational health scores, and stronger performance across the company. Natalie currently serves on the board of the Raleigh Chamber of Commerce and the HR Advisory Board for the Poole School of Management and North Carolina State University. She's also a corporate sponsor and volunteer for the American Heart Association, Dress for Success, and Building Homes for Heroes. She lives here in the Triangle with her husband, Evan, and son, Aiden, also wonderful individuals, which are just more positive reflections of the woman we are about to interview. Please welcome, without further ado, Natalie Ross. We're all clapping for you at home, Natalie.
Thank you for that nice introduction, Joan. I'll send you your check. You just have to send me your address, okay?
I don't need a check. I could use a tail light, actually. I think a rear windshield wiper. No problem.
One of our stores will take good care of you, and we
I know.
install. So
I know.
yourself. Yep.
Fantastic. So I see you're in your home office, which is exactly what everyone else kind of has been doing. Let's just start with this, because we're past the saying, oh, we're in a new workflow. So what is your normal now? It's not a new normal, it's normal. We've been doing this for 6-7 months.
Yeah.
So for an executive who also has to kind of lead by example, tell us about your present workflow and what you're trying to emulate to your colleagues.
That's a great question. I think, the biggest thing has been keeping our team members engaged. I mean, people have been working actually much harder since they've been at home. And what research will tell you is people get on calls. I mean, they're working about 20% more than they did when they were in the office, because you don't have that commute time anymore as a buffer. So we've been seeing people on calls from literally 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I have been trying to be a really good role model about work-life integration, and I work really hard, but I also have a 12-year-old boy who needs me. I have a husband, I have a family, and I don't hide that at all at work. We have a new puppy. One of the things I do every day is walk the dog in the morning. I did it before, I got up a little bit extra early this morning. I dropped my son off at school and we got in a mile walk before I was here today. And I make sure that people know it's okay to take time for yourself. It's okay to do self-care. Make sure that your mental wellness is where it needs to be. And then at the same time, I think people are more productive if they're taking care of themselves. Because I think we went through this period of COVID at the beginning where there was this crisis and people felt like, I need to be in front of my computer. I need to answer my phone. I can't do anything for myself. We have to take, and for us, we were an essential business, so we were open. We were very worried about the safety of our team members in our stores and our distribution centers. We wanted to make sure everyone had the right PPE. We installed plexiglass really, really early on. We had lots of cleaning supplies that we ordered way in advance, but that ended up getting diverted to first responders and hospitals. I mean, it makes all the sense in the world, but then what do you do to keep your employees safe? So we were operating in this crisis mode, I would say, from March to June. And then I think we sort of realized when we started hearing from people, wow, people are really burning out. We need to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves, we're taking care of each other. And ultimately, people will be more productive at work, at home, if you do all these other things besides just being on the phone and being on Zooms, which are, as you probably know, exhausting to be on Zooms, 12 hours a day. So those have been some of the things I've been trying to emulate. And then just really connecting with the team. My team, I've got about 160 people in HR. We have 67,000 people at Advance. So we've been doing a lot of virtual town halls, virtual meetings, virtual happy hours, virtual Trivial Pursuit. We are trying to get together as much as we can. It is not the same thing as getting together in person, as you know, but I think making sure that people are taking care of themselves and having the right level of engagement for your team and for all the team members we have, I think has helped us a lot through the last few months.
There's so much to unpack in all of what you just said, and you're right, and I think everyone who's watching can identify with, you're right, oh, I got to walk the dog, I got to do all these things. It's almost like this reckoning, right, where I remember, let's go back 8 months, right, and you're out to dinner and you're with friends, and if you didn't tell people how busy you were, it was almost kind of a slight. It was embarrassing. If people, it would be, oh God, how are you? Oh, I'm just so busy. I'm so busy. You have no idea how busy I am. I used to think to myself, you're right. I don't work full time. I just go play golf. I go sit by the pool. But now it's almost, there's been this reckoning on this kind of, I don't know if it was an American, a societal, I don't know if it was necessarily maybe a Northeast kind of ideal where it's move faster, get more done, work-life balance. If it's 70-30, why isn't it 80-20? And I feel like there's just been this reckoning, and I hope it's something that's here to stay. Is that something you're trying to communicate from an HR perspective? Because the HR, it's almost like a check and balance on, HR should be a check and balance on all the other managers and all the other departments. So can that be something that you try to put a message on? And how receptive are managers and some of your other product and development and all those other things? How receptive are they to that message of maybe slowing down?
Yeah, I think it all comes back to productivity, and we're not robots. We're humans, right? And I think mental wellness has been something that I've been very concerned about. I think, you read it in almost every newspaper that mental wellness, people are on high alert because they are concerned about people who either live alone or elderly, depressed, they're not getting out, they're not getting the exercise that they typically get. So we have put a lot of training and time. We actually have a series called Leading with Care. It's available to anybody. It's a web series on, how do you lead virtually in this environment? How do you take care of yourself? How do you take care of others? We have guest speakers. Through our employee assistance program, we've had speakers come on to talk about that. We just actually had the American Heart Association. We just did our big drive this year, and
Go Red.
We did well. We raised over $1 million, which was great. Last year we were, I don't know where we ended up this year, but last year we were, I think we were one of the highest sponsors in the country for American Heart. So we're really excited about that. But we had someone come in and talk about, heart disease and hypertension and stress, and how stress actually manifests. And mental wellness is not just about the neck up, it's total body, and why you have to take care of yourself. So I think there's an expectation, to go to your question, that people and managers need to make sure that we're not just thinking about the work, we're thinking about the total person. And I think I think our team members are expecting that from us. I mean, we've done a bunch of pulse surveys. We survey people after every town hall, and people have said, like, wow, I really feel like this company is taking care of me. We were one of the first companies in the Triangle to send everybody home. We were home like the first week of March. And, we had things like My Flexibility, which was flex time and flex place. So if you wanted to work from home, you could get permission from your manager. If you wanted to go, to your kids' soccer game or a baseball game, or you had to drop someone off at Hebrew school, you could leave early to do that and start early. But now it's gone from this, you need permission, to there's an expectation of flexibility that people need. They feel like it's been earned, and it has been earned, because our business is doing great, and a lot of people that were not believers that people could work from home. We had a bunch of managers that said, I don't know about this My Flexibility thing. I need to see where someone is. I need to see when they come in the office. Well, that has completely been debunked by all of this. So I do think that there is an expectation from our team members that we are going to be different going forward. I think the other thing that we did, which was really different, was we empowered people. We had sort of these agile work teams, as I said earlier about, the beginning of the crisis. We had agile work teams that had to figure out, how do you stand up curbside pickup and same day delivery in a couple of weeks, because people are afraid to come into the stores. We did a bond offering that was done in kind of record time. How do you get the PPE out there when there are no supplies available? And what we did was, instead of being, most big companies are more hierarchical, people at lower levels don't have, a ton of decision making. We actually said, we're going to empower these groups to go, we're going to clear the decks for them. We are going to empower them to do what they want to do. And they have, kind of one goal that they're going after. We let them go do it. They did it in record time, and really helped the company. So I actually think there's been this culture shift in terms of what people expect from their employer, and then also what managers expect from a team member. And I do think that there is this understanding that I may not be at my desk all the time or in my home office, but I'm doing work, and I'm going to be just as productive. And that's why I'm so vocal about it. I mean, you'll probably hear my dog bark at some point, but before that was such a no-no. Now it's like, okay, you're home. What are you going to do? The dog is barking. But I am very vocal with people. I will take conference calls on my walks. I will do that because I want people to know that it's okay. And I think that's given people permission to have this flexibility. I think that's going to be, the difference that makes a difference longer term in terms of, us working from home, and then also the loyalty that we have from our team members that are working with Advance right now.
Right, and this level of trust, right? It's also, okay, you know what? As long as you get the work done, productivity doesn't, the genuineness and the quality doesn't suffer.
That's right.
Go ahead. You know when it's due. Do your work.
Right.
And that's kind of, it's refreshing. If you talk about that manager as well, I got to see them come in, that kind of micromanaging, taking off maybe that burden from an employee, it could liberate them. It could be a liberating feeling where they could say, look, I'm on my own time. I can now do this. Watch me. And it goes both ways, because then if productivity does stall, if the quality does lower, well, then you know.
Well, and that's the funny thing, because some managers that weren't believers have said, well, how are we going to manage performance if someone's not in the office? And I said, well, what have you been doing for the last 7 months, right? You can see if somebody's performing or not. So I think, again, it's just there's the old way of thinking about this employee productivity and workspace. Now, there's been a lot of stuff out there about culture. I think people are concerned about company culture with the workspace going away. But culture is about leaders. It's about people. It's about how people think and act. I mean, culture is a squishy thing, and there are measurements for culture. But if you have good leaders and they're communicating and they're engaging their team members, you're going to have a strong culture. Does it make sense to congregate? Yes, you have to. I mean, my son's been doing Zoom Hebrew school now for a while, and, I know they've tried to get together in person. I think it is important for people to congregate, but I don't think it's the be all end all. I don't think you have to congregate to have culture. I think it is a mechanism to bring people together, but I think it's really about the leaders that you have that make up what the culture is. And then the way that you measure that is organizational health, turnover. Those are two big things that you look at to see what's going on in the culture. Is it, are people happy? Are they not happy? Are they engaged? And then obviously that all leads to business results. If you
And it's a state of mind. I mean, it's a state of mind. Are you going to sleep at night, or are you laying in bed stressed? Because, listen, I don't need to be around my boss to know if my boss is upset or happy or whatever. I don't need to be in the office to know if there's an issue going on. We can communicate in so many, how do you, believe me, they let us know, or a viewer will call in. That's for me. But I think in general, this idea of, I mean, when I think of culture, yes, it's more of an emotional state than it creates how you think and how you feel versus what you actually see. And it's all perception anyway.
Yeah, well, and the office building is an artifact of culture, right? Because there are symbols up there about your cultural beliefs and your company logo, but a building doesn't, you can have a building and a company that has no culture. It is about the people that fill up the building. And that's been, I think, something that you'll read a ton about it. The Netflix, there are a bunch of CEOs out there that have said, like, I am so worried about this work from home, I don't want to do it anymore. And then a bunch that have said, you know what, I don't think we'll ever be the same again. And you've got a lot of, companies in Silicon Valley and people that have moved outside of California because it's too expensive. They're sick of the wildfires. They're moving to Texas, they're moving to North Carolina, they're moving to all these other places with better cost of living and better quality of life.
Yeah, and I think I think it's an ebb and flow, right? I mean, we've seen over history, people move away from the city, they move back to the city. They go to the suburbs, they go out of the suburbs. And so it'll go, the pendulum will swing where now people, they can't wait to go to their yards, they can't wait to have space. And then maybe in 10, 20 years, they're gonna be like, I need more activity. Let's go back. I want to be able to walk places. I'm going to be able to feel the energy, all of that things. So I want to peel back the onion a little bit. Let's rewind and learn more a little bit about you and how you got into this. Because did you always know you wanted to be in HR? I know you went to Ithaca. For those who don't know, you did undergrad at Ithaca College. Then you did a master's at American University. And then you have a JD. You're also a lawyer at Brooklyn Law School. So clearly, you spent a lot of time in education. Incredible resume just from there. Did you always know you wanted to be an attorney? Did you always know you wanted to work in kind of labor? I mean, tell us about that track record.
Yeah, I mean, I was always an extrovert. I mean, when I was really young, I think I was in kindergarten, my mom picked me up from school and the teacher said, you know, we really liked your daughter, but her nickname in school is Motor Mouth. She needs to stop talking. So I've always been this.
This is before you ever were going to work at a auto parts store, Motor Mouth. Great.
Right. Actually, yeah, that's good. I haven't thought about that. That's good. So I've always liked being around people. I'm an extrovert. I get my energy from people. I first learned about what human resources was when I got my master's degree. I've always enjoyed learning. I mean, my dad is a doctor. My grandmother, you know, got her master's in biology in Hunter College. She was one of the first women to graduate Hunter College. I mean, so I come from a family that believes in, you know, education, and took an HR class at American. I really liked it. I started learning a little bit more about it. And then one of my, you know, friends from college worked for a recruiting firm. I started working there. One of the things I think in my career that I've done is just kept in touch with people, and I'm a good networker. So, you know, he helped me get the job there. And recruiting was really my first entree into human resources, but I've always loved debate. I always thought we don't really have a lot of lawyers in our family, but I always thought that would be a great profession. And at American, they had a joint degree program. I thought about doing it. I was really anxious to kind of get out in the workforce. So I said, I'm not ready to be in school longer. And then when I was at this search firm, I had someone who was working for me, and she said, I'm going to go to law school. I'm going to apply at night. Would you write a recommendation for me? And I said, well, I've always wanted to go to law school. And she said, well, why don't you apply with me? And I said, oh, that's interesting. And Brooklyn had a night program. And at that point in time, I didn't want to just kind of give up work and just go to school. So I applied, I got in, and I started going at night.
You were working right out of American. You graduated American, your master's,
yep.
And that's in DC. And then you went to New York. So what was your first position?
So it's stuff that's not on my resume. I was a coordinator for a financial services firm. I worked for a publishing company called Gruner and Yar. I was an HR coordinator there. And then I went to this search firm, Gunderson Partners, and it was a boutique firm that specialized in marketing and marketing services.
How did you break through? Because here's something where, look, there's a lot of college graduates right now, right? And I mean, you went to America, you went to Ithaca. Not a giant school, not a small school. You're obviously competing with a lot of people. Then you go to American University, where, you know, that's also, I mean, a huge pot of qualified applicants. How do you break through? You have to start somewhere, right? So how did you get your resume picked up? How did you separate yourself from the other pile of resumes and applicants? I mean, how did you get that start?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would tell everybody that's getting started or has a kid that's thinking about doing it, do an internship, make contacts, meet people. That is the best way to get started right now, because you're right, it is so competitive for talent. I mean, even though there's a very high unemployment rate, it's still very hard for college grads to get jobs. It's funny, almost every job I've gotten except for one was because I knew someone. So it's always been about networking for me, Jonah. And I think, you know, it's either subtle. Some people are good at networking, and some people are networking to the point of being maybe borderline too much or a little obnoxious. And what I would recommend is, reaching out to people on LinkedIn, keeping in touch with people. I kept in touch with this person from college, and that's how I got the job at Gunderson. And then, from there, went to law school at night with this other friend. Estee Lauder was really the only company I went through a recruiter, and I didn't know somebody. The law firm was a professor that I had in law school, and he said, well, we've got this employment practice. The firm was probably more known for real estate at the time. It's not around anymore, but they had a big employment practice. They had Montefiore Medical Center, which is a huge medical center in New York. They had all the Northeastern Walmart business. They had McDonald's, they had Siemens, and he referred me to the firm, and that's how I got that job. The job at PepsiCo I got through someone I knew at the search firm. It was my old boss that I had kept in touch with, and I practiced law for a little over 3 years. I really liked it. I loved the intellectual challenge of it, but I was locked in a room by myself. I mean, that's just how it is when you're in litigation. You're looking through documents, you're writing doc briefs, and I just thought, you know what, I really missed the people element of this. I liked the intellectual challenge of it, but I missed being around people. But yeah, through PepsiCo, I got that role through someone that I knew. It was a partner in the search firm. And then the job that I'm in now, I mean, our CEO, Tom Greco, I worked with him at PepsiCo. He was a mentor to me and called me and said, I'm leaving PepsiCo and I'm going to need a head of HR and would love for you to come with me. And that's sort of how I've ended up where I am. So I think staying in touch with people, networking, trying to find mentors and sponsors are really important. There is a difference. I mean, mentors are people that will talk to you. They'll give you advice. Sponsors are people that have the power to hire you and make hiring decisions about you, and you need both. And I've always been good about keeping in touch with people and reaching out. And sometimes it's sending an article about something that I think someone would be interested in. It's not always asking for something. Sometimes it's just making a connection and saying hi. So I think networking is super important, but for kids in school, these internships that kids do, I mean, they get hired into companies. So that and keeping in touch with people, even professors, I think is, those are two great ways to get started.
Yeah, it reminds me of the greatest advice I was ever given. If there are sports fans who are watching, I interned at ESPN, and so Scott Van Pelt, who's a longtime anchor there, he said to me, Jonah, everybody tells you in this business or whatever, it's all about who you know, and you kind of talk about that, right? Mm-hmm. But he says that's actually, I will paraphrase, that's baloney, because it's not about who you know, it's about who knows you. Because think about your professor, right? Mm-hmm. How many students did that professor have?
A lot.
A lot. And how many of those students probably said, well, I know him. Okay, so it's about who I know. But if he doesn't know you, if you haven't separated yourself, if that professor didn't know about the work ethic of Natalie Rothman, the professional maturity of Natalie Rothman, of all those qualities about you, then it doesn't matter who you know. I mean, if that person doesn't recognize you, they're not going to or care to remember you. If you didn't give them a good reason to remember you, why should he or she return the call? Why should he or she acknowledge your email? That's a huge difference. And that kind of initiative that you talked about is an easy initiative to separate yourself from everybody else and to get you to the top and to make sure not about who you know, but who knows you.
I like that. Can I borrow that?
Sure.
Okay, I will.
Yeah, it's gotten me here. So, yeah. And we had a question, which actually, and especially because, what words of advice do you have for recent graduates in this virtual environment in their first job? If they're not around people, if they're not in a place where you could say, "Hey, can I do this for you? What can I shadow you?" How did they excel in this new environment?
I mean, I think there's lots of ways. I mean, obviously you're not going to get that organic, you stop by somebody's office and the water cooler talk. But I think that people that raise their hand for more work or raise their hand to learn and say, hey, I'm interested in this department, if you're in a company, that opens up a ton of doors for you and you don't have to be in person to do that. I mean, my, assistant is a great example of that. She wasn't always my assistant. She started out as kind of a recruiting analyst, and she was assigned a project to work with me. And then I had an assistant that was getting promoted, and I said, I want to talk to this person because I think she took great initiative on this project with me. And now she's my assistant, and she will go into another HR role after this. And what I will tell you is she's always raising her hand to help. If she sees an opportunity, hey, I want to learn more about inclusion and diversity. Can I actually take notes when the team member networks are meeting so I can learn more about what they do? I've never done an investigation before. I actually want to sit in on that. So I think raising your hand to show that you have this interest in learning is really important, and then also an interest in a company. That's going to set yourself apart from other people, and people will make time to talk to you. People like talking about their careers. Most people will spend 30 minutes with someone that they don't know, if it's an intern in the company or if you're, kind of new in a company. The other thing that I would say is work with your manager on it. So, hopefully you have a good manager, but just say, I'm interested in learning more about the company. These are the functions I'm interested in. Can you introduce me to some people? And again, 9 times out of 10, most people will do that. And if they don't, then you take, your own initiative on it. If you have a human resources department, go to the human resources department to talk about, how do you grow your career? How do you learn more about a company? I think those are all ways to do it. And, it's a little bit more awkward now because you have to set up a call, you set up a Zoom, but I think that awkwardness is, people are used to doing this now. I think at the beginning it was a little strange, and now people are just used to, getting meeting requests from people that they don't know. I mean, I think it's become our new normal. So
what was the transition like for you when you kind of worked in these little boutique, firms or these other things, and then you moved on to, a giant PepsiCo? What was that like? And before, because this is, look, we'll get to the COVID stuff again, but this was then you're going to this big Fortune 500 company. Maybe I'm not as well versed. I do get the Wall Street Journal, but I'm not as well. But maybe it's even a Fortune 100 company.
yeah.
What's that transition like? And was that nerve-wracking for you? I mean, what was that? And what was that first culture like?
It is known as a very competitive environment. It's extremely competitive to Coke. I mean, when I was working there, we had candidates that would come in with, the wrong kind of water. And, we have, PepsiCo has Aquafina water.
That kind of competitive. When people say competitive, what does that mean? Does that mean you're competing against someone else for a better TPS report, or is that?
No, it means that it's a product we don't sell. So, for example, the PepsiCo water was Aquafina. Someone
someone came in with Dasani. Oh no.
Well, and it was funny because I remember interviewing this woman, and she was really nice. She put her Dasani on the desk. We started the interview, and I said, "May I get you another water?" And I was trying to be nice about it, so I didn't, shock her or make her feel uncomfortable. And she said, "No, I'm good." I mean, she really didn't understand that wasn't our water. And so she said, "No, I'm good." And I said, "Actually, that's not a PepsiCo brand. And if someone walks by this office and sees that you don't have one of our brands and you have a Coke brand and we're PepsiCo, that's going to become a problem. So I'd really like to get you another." She finally let me, but there was like this argument about it, which was
right. But that also goes to preparation. I mean, and like situational awareness. I mean, these are things you can do, like proofreading your cover letter or whatever, and knowing, you're coming to talk on an ABC station. Don't talk about Dateline.
That's right. That's right. But I think so. I knew someone at PepsiCo. I used to work with them. And when I was at Gunderson Partners, one of our accounts was PepsiCo. So I actually knew some people that had worked there.
And they knew you. And they knew
me. That's right. Thank you. They knew me. And one of the first things that I did was, and I had a great boss, and she said, "You really need to sit down with these stakeholders for all the various parts of your job." I started out as a HR business partner for corporate. So I had legal, and I had corporate communications, and I was HR for HR. So I sat down with all the leaders and all these people, and I just said, "Tell me about what it's like to work here. Tell me what are the landmines, what are things to avoid?" And if you ask the same question to lots of different people and you get different answers, then you kind of learn a little bit about the culture. Maybe people aren't aligned in terms of what the priorities are, what the strategy is, what's important. People were super consistent. And yes, the company is competitive outwardly to Coke, but whenever I was there, if I called someone, like I said earlier, when you get a new job, what do you do? I mean, I did that when I first got there. I would call people up and say, with no introduction, just say, "I'm new. I just started in human resources. I've been told that you're a great person to talk to about the company and about this function that I'm supporting. Can I sit down with you?" And people would do it all the time. So that kind of took away some.
What's the worst they're going to say? No. Okay.
No, in some companies, they ignore your email. They don't respond. I mean, it's a big enough company that you can hide, or someone say,
Right.
I don't really have the time. But in some companies, people would just not respond to you, and people took the time to, to talk to me. So
But you wouldn't know unless you took the shot.
that's right. That's right. Yeah. So that's kind of how I worked through it. And I had I developed a lot of great mentors there. I mean, men and women. One of the first people that I worked with was Larry Thompson, he worked under John Ashcroft, and he worked for President Bush.
Former Attorney General, yeah.
Yep. And he actually helped defend Clarence Thomas in the Anita Hill trials, and he had all these crazy pictures on his walls of these very important people that you probably talk to every day. And he would, every time I would go in his office for a meeting, he would sit down and talk to me about something interesting in the news or an interesting case, and people really took the time to help me be a better executive. I mean, I was really lucky, but I also showed the interest. I would bring him articles, we would talk about things. And it was also kind of the first time in my career where, PepsiCo was one of the first companies out there that talked about inclusion and diversity. Larry Thompson is African American. I mean, it was a pretty diverse place, and they had team member networks. They talked about representation. They talked about promoting people of color, females. And when I was there, actually, I developed it was kind of a first ever women in sales development program, because I noticed that retention of females at the time was turnover and retention. And Tom Greco so Tom Greco at the time was the CEO of Frito-Lay, and I had someone who was the CEO of beverages, and I said, this is really a problem, and I want to develop this this pilot program. It started in beverages and then expanded to the whole company. Andrew Newey, the former CEO, came and spoke, and it's still going on. And we were able to retain most of the people that went into the program. They got promoted, and it became this special community of people that grew to several hundred people that, some have left PepsiCo. I mean, I still have relationships with, a lot of the people that went through the program. But that was through, developing this relationship with some of these mentors and sponsors that said, okay, we think this is important. And actually, this is a great event for us to get to know our top talent at PepsiCo. And it was just a great experience, because it helped me realize, being in an inclusive environment at work is so important. You get different thinking, you get different innovation, but you also need to make sure that you are capturing not only the unique backgrounds of the people that you're working with, but also providing them a place where they feel safe coming to work, where people feel like themselves. PepsiCo has a saying, bring your whole self to work. And, I felt like getting more involved with these different cohorts and groups, that there was a real need for that. And now fast forward to, 2020, there's a huge need, I think, in the workplace, to make people feel safe, to make people feel like they have a voice, they can come to work and talk about what's going on. That wasn't always the case. You didn't always talk about race. You didn't always talk about
and that's a good transition, because I do want to talk about diversity and inclusion. And let's start, because I want to go back back at Pepsi, because while trying not to age you, we're peers. It's not like you were working in the 80s and 90s. This was in the mid-aughts. So this was 2006, 2007, before the recession.
Yeah.
Let's start with this. What was it like as a woman? Was it any different? I think, yes, it's important to talk about diversity and inclusion in terms of race and background, but let's talk about gender first. Even then, we're talking only about 15 years ago. Was the culture, or was there anything different about being a woman in these large settings first?
Yeah, it was interesting, because most of the groups that I supported after I got out of corporate, I went into the business, and I worked with a lot of salespeople that were men. I worked with mostly men, and I had a lot of mentors that were men. No, at PepsiCo, it was a pretty supportive environment, I have to say. Going to Advance, I kind of came in, and I was one of two females on the executive team. There were barely any females at senior levels in the company. That was much harder more recently, which is ironic.
And again, this is not talking about the 70s, 80s, 90s. We're talking about now.
Yeah.
Right.
Was a lot harder. And I never felt unsupported at PepsiCo. Again, I had a lot of great mentors, Tom Greco, Brooke Tanner, Ann Fink. I mean, there were a bunch of people who looked out for me, and we had a bunch of females in senior level positions at PepsiCo. Coming to Advance when I first got there, I mean, this is a male dominated business. It's aftermarket auto parts, it's a retailer. There were barely any women there. And fortunately, Tom Greco is, yes, he's a white male, but he walks the talk on this kind of stuff. And he looked around and he said, okay, I know this is going to be a little tough at first, but we are going to make this place more diverse and more inclusive. And we brought in a bunch of, senior level females, and they attracted more females. And then there were also, we noticed people in the organization that were kind of buried in the organization.
Right.
Those people got promoted, men and women.
Well, let me ask you this question, because and I'm going to get a little investigative reporter on you now.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So they're mostly men working there.
Yeah.
So what? If they're good, they're good. Tell me about, why did it matter that it was all men? And why did it help people understand? Because I think people hear these things, oh, it's all men, it's all white. Okay, well, were you ever made to feel uncomfortable as a woman? Did you feel like you were shut out? And
Yes.
help people under. Yeah, yes. Tell us, enlighten us, because I don't think that is what needs to be told more. Help people understand what that was like and why that mattered to you.
It was everything from, you are not invited to a meeting because we don't typically have HR at the meeting. And then I know it was an operating meeting, an operating business meeting, and this is with someone who's not there anymore. And I said, well, I actually want to learn the business. I think it's good for me to go to the meeting. I don't need to say a whole lot, but I want to be there. No, we don't need you to be there. And I asked twice. So I went to the CEO about it, and he said, be patient, we will make some changes here. And eventually that changed. The other issue was coming from New York and working in the South. I worked with a lot of Southern men. Right. And I think the stereotype for women is women, I was very vocal, and they were not used to that. And that was a bit of a culture shift.
Did that affect you? And I mean, how do you deal with that emotionally? Because you obviously want to be, I imagine you want to be strong to these men, and you want to show that you're there, but in many ways also, it's a sign of strength to feel. It's a sign of strength to recognize when something bothers you.
Yeah. I'm a pretty tough-minded person. I have my father to thank for that. My dad was always really tough on me. So, I was able to deal with it, and I would come home maybe frustrated a little bit and talk to my husband about it, but I didn't let it get to me, and I didn't want them to see that it was getting to me. And there were a couple of times where I had to have conversations with people on, hey, there's no trust here. I don't, either information was not being shared that I found out about, and I kind of said, what's going on here? And, again, there's not this, in the South, you don't directly confront people. That's a no-no. And you don't talk about politics at work, although I think people are talking about politics a little bit more now. So I got in people's face a little bit, and I just kind of said, don't mess with me. I mean, in a nicer way, but I just said, I'm not going anywhere. And if you think this is going to scare me, it's not. And I had the support of a great boss. And I ended up, there are a lot of people that aren't at the company anymore that didn't believe in the, inclusion and diversity journey. We have a lot of great men there. I mean, I'm really proud of the team that we have. I think it's really well-rounded and it's diverse. But I kind of pushed through it. I mean, you work at a New York law firm, you have a father who's a doctor who's tough on you your whole life, and it kind of teaches you how to survive. And that's how I was able to, deal with it.
Yeah. And how about being a mom? How about that? I mean, because now we're talking about, you're walking the dog and all this, but you have a 12-year-old son. So, I mean, you were a new mom at Pepsi. And then, you're having to, potentially, have, I don't know what maternity leave was like then. I don't know if there were, places private where you could nurse. And again, we're not talking about ancient history here. talking about
Yeah.
only in the last decade.
Yeah.
So how did you navigate that, and how did you be affirmatively confident in making ground rules for yourself and for your colleagues?
Yeah, it's funny, at PepsiCo, I wasn't at such a high level. I mean, I'm the head of HR for a $10 billion company. There, I was a senior director of a $5 billion division, but I had several people kind of above me. I mean, I was a mini CHRO. And at PepsiCo, it's very much a work hard culture. Work hard, play hard. I mean, people do stuff outside of work, like you're allowed to have a life outside of work, but people are working 7 days a week. It was less permissible, I must say, at PepsiCo to do stuff for your family and yourself. People did it, they just didn't talk about it as much. And I would say at Advance, it is probably more of a family type culture where it's more okay. But now with the pandemic, we've made it, even more okay. But at PepsiCo, they had nursing rooms for mothers. I mean, they did a ton of stuff for women there. That's why I felt so supported. At Advance, when I first got to Advance, one of the first things I changed, there was no maternity leave policy, none. And I just said, if we want women to work here, we need a maternity leave policy. Like, this is crazy. So it just, very, very different.
And how do you navigate that? Is it slow and steady? Is it, you kind of gingerly add, like, oh, well, here's, we'll do 2 weeks off, 2 weeks paid, but then FMO, I mean, or do you go, I mean, is it slow and steady change, or is it drastic?
We were drastic. I mean, and I was fortunate that the CEO was supportive, and then, the management team that we brought in was supportive. And there were things, I mean, we're a company going through transformation. So we're always looking for productivity. How do you, maybe reduce something here so you can invest here? We're always looking at team member investments. I mean, we've started a frontline stock program. We've improved the 401k. I mean, we've done a ton of stuff over the last couple of years, but it was sort of a no-brainer for us.
Yeah. I definitely credit both my parents worked. My mom now is the one that's still working. My dad is semi-retired. So I definitely, you've all been pioneers, I think, in showing how it can be done. And but shout out to the dads also for picking up the slack sometimes when, you're at the meeting and we got to pack the lunches and whatever. I think, nurturing is not exclusive to being nurturing is not exclusive to one parent. It certainly can and should be the responsibility of both if the child is so blessed to have that. You've talked about, so yes, we talked about your role as a woman. So let's talk about diversity, because I think in a more progressive setting, yes, diversity is it's certainly an ideal, should be an ideal for everyone. But there is always this kind of push and pull with those very divisive words: affirmative action, equal opportunity employment. Mm-hmm. And look, you're in HR. You head HR, and if anyone knows the balance between trying to promote a good workplace, but also make sure that someone who's well qualified is not overlooked. Mm-hmm. I don't know how you balance that. I don't know how you do it. I don't know if there's a good way to do it. But let's, help people understand the predicament that you're in, and how do you expand the diverse pool of applicants, but don't alienate those who may be passed over because they're white.
Yeah. I think, one of the first things we did at Advance, because it wasn't super diverse, was talk about the business case, why diversity is important, because this is not something you can shove down people's throats. It just won't work. We spent a lot of time on managing bias training. This is before Starbucks was doing it. Remember that incident with Starbucks in Philadelphia? So we did it like 2 years before. I had a great head of inclusion and diversity. Her name's Heather Lawley. She worked at Cisco, and she said, there is a method for change management in doing this. So we showed people that companies that were more diverse had better innovation, better productivity, better sales. We then looked at pockets of where we had diverse talent. So, and one of our biggest consumers is Hispanic. I mean, in the Hispanic culture, you teach people grandparents teach their grandkids how to fix cars. I mean, it is a big part of our business.
And I tell you, there was one, if I can go back to college and do it all again, there's like 2 classes that I wish they would do. One is like Intro to Home Economics, which is what is insurance, what are mortgages, what are stock, like it just intro to like different things, deductibles, all these big words. And the other is intro to auto mechanics. What the hell are you looking at under that hood?
Right.
The answer is not called AAA. The answer is not called AAA.
That's
but
right.
how do you change a tire? How do you change your oil and all these things? Carry on. Good for the Hispanic culture.
Yeah. So yeah, I lost my train of thought there. I was like, where's he going with this?
I was going, this is in opening the hood of the car.
Yeah.
I just, you know, cars, like I look on, I have no idea what I'm looking at. And I wish I did.
Go to a store, they'll open the hood, they'll change your battery for you, it's free. Yeah. Everyone come, fantastic. So anyway, we talked about why we really did the business case for inclusion and diversity. I mean, that's where you have to start. And then I think people started getting it because, I mean, it's been a topic of interest for a while. I mean, now it's a super hot topic with everything going on, but we started there. And then we also looked in stores that had, in markets that were, you know, skewed either high Hispanic or high African American. And we actually looked at the diversity of those stores. And in some of the Hispanic markets, we saw that they had higher sales because they had bilingual team members, because people coming in the store didn't speak English. So we developed all of these stories. We profiled some women that were strong salespeople, and made sure that people knew about that, and that, you know, a lot of the customers preferred females waiting on them because they had a different way, you know, about it in terms of diagnosing a problem. And people come in our stores because they have a problem. This isn't like shoe shopping where you walk out, your wiper doesn't work, your battery is dead, you can't get your kid to school, you can't go to work. So there's a sense of urgency to it. So we went through all of that in terms of why it was important. We trained people on it. Then we brought in some great people so people could actually see that we had diverse talent. So our CIO is, is Indian. Our chief accounting officer is African American. We have a head of compliance who's Asian. We started bringing in, you know, people of color and females. They were great performers. They were great leaders. They attracted other people. So you do it in a way where it's kind of like a slow burn. This is not something where you can rip off the Band-Aid like maternity leave that I talked about. The other thing that we did was we developed team member networks, and people were almost crying out for it. And these are, we have 9 of them. We launched them in 2016, and we now have over 50 chapters across all of the, you know, United States. We're in, we have 5,100 stores. And these are places where, you know, a team member network, it could be service network, for example. So these are people that were in the military. And each team member network has sort of a mission. They want to give back to the company. So with service, for example, they help us to hire veterans. I mean, that's a really important part of our diversity and talent strategy. So, and they've also helped us with an onboarding programs for veterans. LGBTQ is our Pride network. And, you know, they have worked with the Lambda Car Club across the United States. And those are thousands of potential us. And they were, you know, thinking about developing a loyalty program for them. Our Hispanic network is Fuego, and they've helped us with advertising, branding, recruitment. So we are looking at this as a way where people can get career development. You don't have to be part of the cohort to join. And they're also doing some sort of give back to the company. So there's been this sort of groundswell that inclusion and diversity is part of who we are. It's part of our DNA. So it's not forced. So when we talk about having diverse slates, I mean, obviously you pick the best candidate, and then sometimes the candidate is diverse, sometimes it's not diverse. But what we require is we want to see diverse slates. You want to have diverse panels of interviewers interviewing people, because people will not come into a company if they don't see people that are diverse. And then, you know, we talk to them a little bit about what we do from an inclusion and diversity standpoint, and that's helped bring people in. We have people that are not diverse that say, well, what about me? Like, what are you doing for me? Right? And you try to get them involved in the bigger journey of it, and that they're part of it and that they can participate. And we have white men that go to the female network. I mean, you came to an event, Jonah, and I don't know if it was a Connects event, which is our young
I
professionals.
believe it was a young professionals event, yes.
Right. So, and there are people there that are not young professionals. You have people
No.
there that are Gen Xers and boomers. And, so we try to make it open to everyone so they feel like they can be part of the culture. But initially, when I was first here, this was not something we could have ripped off. It's now part of who we are. And that if people don't like that, they don't need to be part of the company. I mean, it's that important to us.
Right. I'm going to get investigative reporter on you again because.
Thank you for warning me every time you do it. That's helpful.
I try to do that. I didn't do that with the vice president, so I guess I picked my audience. What about being Jewish? Because I think what's lost in all this diversity, and I'll be transparent here. I have a wonderful culture at ABC 11. It's been great, but there have been. I think if people have watched, you may have wondered, why does an anti-Semitic incident not get covered like it would an anti-Black incident? Yeah. Why are these comments okay, but these comments are reprehensible? And why does there seem to be some sort of double standard? Why does anti-Semitism not rank as high? Why is there even a rank on the racism scale? And so we're having these discussions, and a lot of it has to do with awareness. I think people just don't know. It's easy to spot, racism, anti-Black racism. It's not, we know what it looks like, the dog whistles are for anti-Semitism, but most people don't. So we're looking at some training, and it found out that Disney doesn't have any for anti-Semitism. And that didn't surprise me. I don't think companies have it. I don't think it's on their radar. What is it like for you to be a Jewish executive?
That's interesting. Yeah, I would say in New York, it was a lot easier because there were just more Jewish people there. Coming to the South was a bit of a shock to our system and my system. So, I told you a little bit about being a woman and being excluded from some things. I mean, again, that was the worst thing that happened to me. Nothing else happened. I've heard of lots of other stories. I mean, I've never had a Me Too thing, thank goodness, that I've ever had to deal with. I will tell you that sometimes people talk about the Lord at work, less often now because I think they see my hair on fire when they do it. So I think that other than people wanting to potentially do Bible study at work, which we just don't do for any faith, and people talking about the Lord, I haven't really experienced any anti-Semitism at work here. What I've experienced is a lot of people assuming that you go to church or that you, do certain things. And I think being a Jewish executive has maybe a little bit more of a unicorn. So I look at it as an opportunity to educate people on what being Jewish is all about. I think that that's my responsibility. And I think, I did have an incident once at work where it was like, she's a Jewish, someone made a comment, she's a Jewish New Yorker. And I just, I said, that is inappropriate. And they actually told me that they said it. And I said, that is beyond inappropriate. I wouldn't talk about your religion at work. And again, it's this education around, it is a culture to be, there's something very cultural about being Jewish, but it is a religion, and people need to be respectful of that. I would never say someone's a Catholic North Carolinian, right? So it was, that was sort of a weird incident. But on Yom Kippur, I had people are trying, but I had people texting me, Happy Yom Kippur. Hope you have a great holiday. I'm like, nope, wrong one.
If you really want to make their day, and I mean make their day, meaning like blow their minds, tell them Hanukkah is actually not that big of a deal on the Jewish
Right. Right.
What?
Right.
What?
But, people would, it was funny because I worked the morning of Rosh Hashanah, and I said, well, there's another Jewish executive too. And I said, well, it's the new year. I think everyone wants 2020 to be over. So dip some apples and honey. And it was cute. I had people texting me with apples and honey and saying, yeah, we're ready for this year to be over too. So I think people have just come to know it's just who it's part of who I am. And I think because people like me and I like them, that they are developing more of an understanding to what it means to be Jewish.
Great, great. All right, well, let's get to some of these questions, which you've answered some of them already. We talked about words of advice for recent graduates, certainly about initiative and excelling in this environment. You can still pick up the phone. You can still participate in meetings. We talked about balancing hiring through your network, bringing in people with very different backgrounds. Here's an interesting question. Going back, you said there were 3 things that you said illustrate advantages of diversity. What were those?
3 things. I don't know if I said 3 things.
Or you talked about, I can remember. You talked about how, from a business standpoint, how having bilingual, sales.
Yeah.
You talked about how, basically you had to, at business, you have to make the money argument. You have to explain why it matters.
Yeah, I think diversity promotes different thinking because you don't have groupthink. I probably have more than 3. That's why you threw me off by saying 3. But
that was the question. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I think that diversity promotes innovation and different thinking, right? Because I think if you want to challenge each other and everyone comes from the same background and they look the same and they act the same, you're not going to get anything different in terms of ideas. I definitely think, that's a huge thing. I think you get better business performance. And then I also think, for us and for a lot of businesses out there, you want to look like the community that you serve in. And, we don't live in a white male world anymore. So for us, we want to look like the customers in the communities that we serve. And I think that ultimately helps better sales. At the end,
I don't know if you're able to, I was about to say, that was perfect lead into my question. And I don't know if you see this, but can you tell, do consumers, prioritize this? Is there a metric that shows that consumers are paying attention? We know with, look, again, certainly there are subsets of products that, yes, people make it important.
You get Yelp ratings, you get customer satisfaction ratings. We see things we look at postings on Facebook, on Instagram, but there are customer service metrics around the quality of service and the experience that they have with a team member. There's not really anything that is a direct correlation on, I was a woman and I was so happy to be waited on by another woman. There's a lot of qualitative stories that we get on that, but it's not really measured anywhere. But I will tell you that in certain places, so we're in Texas, we're in Florida, we're in Puerto Rico, we're in, a lot of these markets where it's high Hispanic. If you don't have bilingual team members in there and people come in that are not speaking English, and maybe they know English, but they want to speak Spanish, you'll lose the sale. They'll walk out. They'll go to those other places that you said earlier, those other competitors that we don't want people to shop at. I'm not even going to say their names. So I
can hear their jingles. They're not as good as the Advanced Auto Parts.
Doesn't mean anything. Yeah.
Right. Okay, now this is an interesting question. What are your company initiatives to hire special needs populations, of particular interest, people on the autism spectrum? And that's another great, when people think diversity, I feel like the irony is when they think diversity, it's actually through a very shallow lens. It's not a diverse lens.
Yeah.
Diversity means a lot of different things.
It does. We include veterans in that. We're going to hire 10,000 veterans over the next 5 years. We're at like 7,800. We have an initiative and we have a team member network. It's called PWD. It's People with Disabilities. And we actually started this initiative. One of our senior leaders is from Walgreens. He's Jewish. His name is Reuben Sloan. And he did this at Walgreens where you partner with, there are a lot of nonprofits out there. We partnered with a nonprofit called ARC. And we started bringing in people that have cognitive disabilities and are hearing impaired, not only in our distribution centers, but also in our call centers. So for cognitive disabilities, they do well with repetitive tasks. So call centers are great for that because there's a lot of like answering the same question. Data science is also great because they're kind of at a computer figuring out a problem, almost math problem, and don't really need to engage in other activities. But I actually have a great story in our distribution center. We brought in this gentleman in Colorado, he didn't actually know how to sign, but through the state, they come in with an interpreter who kind of taught him how to sign. And then the people in the distribution center, he was allowed to use his phone. Typically, people are not allowed to use his phone, but he was allowed to use his phone to text his supervisor, to talk to the supervisor. And people in the distribution center were so moved by him that they actually taught themselves sign language to communicate with him. The productivity in that distribution center is through the roof. The turnover is down. And that's an initiative that we're launching in a bunch of our distribution centers. And what's really cool about it is, you know, with the hearing impaired community, once you get one person, it kind of opens you up to all this unbelievable talent. I mean, people are, you know, even though there's a high unemployment rate in retail, a lot of people are fighting over talent for the distribution centers. You think about Amazon, all the hiring that they're doing, and then all of these retailers that either are closing stores or have less people in the stores, they're doing mostly online. So we are competitively, I mean, we are really fighting for talent in the distribution centers, and having this diverse pool of talent that we can choose from has helped us, you know, tremendously. But yeah, we're a big believer in PWD. It's and it's so great. It's so heartwarming to hear these stories. It's just awesome.
And how about, so that's one new initiative you're doing. How about other new training and reskilling programs that you're piloting at the company? Because you bring up a really good point. Yes, there's high unemployment, but that doesn't mean that there are no jobs out there. It's one thing if there's high unemployment and no one's hiring. There's actually a lot of different things, but there are not a lot of skilled. I mean, there are no masons anymore. There are no tailors anymore. There are no plumbers anymore, electricians. I mean, the trades, like auto mechanics. I mean, all of these things.
Yeah, I mean, I think we do a ton of training. So within our distribution centers, for example, we do something called a realistic job preview before people come in, so they actually know what it's like. Because sometimes it's operating machinery, sometimes it's kind of picking and packing, because we don't make anything, we just move product in our distribution centers. So we do heavy training in distribution centers, we do heavy training in the stores. We created something called a learning journey where we touch someone for their first year in the job, and it's a combination of on-the-job training and online training. We also have a multi-generational workforce, so people like to learn differently. So your boomers and your silent generation are going to be different than your millennials. So we've started to develop like bite-sized content online that can train people on certain things, on certain products. That's pretty important, and selling skills, as well as classroom training, which has now become virtual. So that's something we're definitely leaning into. And then leadership, I think, has become really, really important as a company, particularly since you're virtual, and we're doing more with that as well.
What are you doing about training managers? This is an interesting question. Positive motivating language versus demotivating language. And I guess this goes to a philosophy about, you know, how do you encourage people? Is it tough love or is it love? Is it, you know, telling them all the time they're doing things right? Or is it, you know, being, again, you give them that, you know, do you use positive reinforcement, or do you only call them when they do something wrong? And that, I don't know if that's a company thing, or is it an individual manager thing? I don't know how you do that.
So we have encouraged, we call it continuous feedback. So it's a little bit of everything. I mean, one thing you don't want to do is the feedback sandwich of where you say someone's great, then you tell them all the stuff that they've got to work on, and then you end with something's great, because all they hear is the great stuff. They don't hear about the stuff in the middle of the sandwich. We like a book called Radical Candor. It's the woman who, she was with Google at one point. It's a big orange book. It's actually up on my bookshelf. But Radical Candor is about, you know, in the moment feedback that you see. It is balanced feedback, but it's not sugar-coated feedback. And that's what we've been leaning in on as a company. We're actually going to roll out some more training from Radical Candor. But I think that in the moment coaching when it happens, so if I'm in a meeting and I see something, I'll talk to someone after, or before a meeting, I will coach someone what they need to do. But I think kind of telling it how it is and how someone can get better the next time, or if someone did a great job, why they did a great job. I think it's both, but I think people don't want this stuff sugar-coated. They want transparency, and they want leaders that they know will give them direct feedback. I think, you know, that's where you see the best organizational health, in teams.
How has the onboarding process changed during the pandemic? Bring it back to the pandemic now, because a lot of this training, a lot of this thing is, and again, this creating culture and the positive reinforcement, getting new people involved. I know every time I start a new company, you have your orientation, you usually sit down, it's a little present. Now I guess a lot of it can be remote anyway. So maybe, I did my onboarding, at least the terms of learning about the company and HR, I did that remote. I logged on and I saw, Walt Disney Company, different things, but you still, maybe a new desk, a new computer, all new things. That's true. How do you learn about all the new systems or whatever if you're not in person?
We've had to totally change that. So in the stores and the DCs, they're still doing onboarding, but we've done some things virtual. And then for corporate employees, which are, the smallest portion of our employee base, it's all been virtual. We ship them computers. We have, if they're based in Raleigh, or, we still have employees in Roanoke, they can actually go to that location to pick up stuff that they need for their home office. The training's always been online. We really haven't had a ton of in-person training, so that hasn't changed a ton. But in terms of like the meet and greets and having them learn about the company, and then we'll have people do web access with them to show them how to use, the travel and expense system or other systems. So we've pivoted quite a bit, and we were doing more in-person training in our stores, and that's now been virtual. And when we open a new store, we typically had a team of people in there training people. You have some people in there now, but you have to be worried about social distancing. So we've done everything from virtual store visits to virtual store setup, where you've got a group of people with, they're walking around with an iPad so you can see what's going on and you give them feedback. And, we've pivoted to doing that. And it's working out. We have a bunch of new employees that have said best onboarding experience because it was so deliberate. It's not like, a lot of times team members would show up, managers may not be as prepared. You have to be prepared, because if you're not actively doing something with them, they're going to sit by their desk and, wonder how to get on a system or get a computer or, other things like that.
Where do we go from here, I guess? And this is, crystal ball, I guess, but look, you've worked in this, you've seen a lot of progression already, more diverse, more women in executive roles. We've now talked about how walking the dog, taking conference calls, all these things are kind of meshed together. Where am I working? On my dining room table. If I turn this around, though, I've got my daughter's toys. I've got 2 other computers on this. Where are we heading towards? Advanced Auto Parts is not going to be back in the office until at least January. Tell us, if you can, what some of the discussions are, what some of the ideas being floated around, and where do you see work in 1 year, 5 years? What's it look like?
Yeah. I don't think we're going to go back to where we were. I said it before. I think there is an expectation of employees and team members that health and safety is first. And I don't think that that's going to change. And I think that there is people are finding their balance at home. Work-life balance is such a weird saying, because it's work-life integration. It's what you feel like is balance. But I think that people will demand the flexibility that they have now. I think employers will give it because they're seeing the productivity. I think office space is going to be used very differently than it has in the past. I don't think it's going to be a place that people go every day because they're supposed to go sit there. I think it's going to be purposeful, and it's going to be used for purposes of engagement, collaboration, big milestones. I don't think we're going to see office space where it was in the past. So, in some ways, I think this has made all of us sort of appreciate the little things. Hopefully you're spending more time with your family. You're appreciating that, you're doing things together, and, we're doing a lot of things as a family that, maybe we haven't done together in a couple of years. Because as you said, we're not so scheduled. We're not so busy. We're not going out all weekend doing all these things. So there's just not as much to do. And that's been really nice. And I hope that some of that stays, because I do think it's made It's made our family unit stronger. I've heard that from lots of other people. And then I think ultimately it'll make businesses stronger too if they keep up this, care for their employees, focus on mental wellness and engagement. I mean, mental wellness used to be such a stigma. You don't talk about it. And I think now that people are talking about it, they get the help that they need, and hopefully, are taking preventative measures before, things get really bad. So obviously I didn't want the pandemic to happen. I don't think anybody did, but I do think that there's a silver lining in some of this. And I think people will fight the gravity pulling them back to kind of the old way to, staying where we are, and maybe finding a happy medium once things, go back to what it used to look like.
Right. To people, I mean, when we think back of February, do we really want to go back to, getting up in that commute? Do we really want to go back to whether it's sitting on the subway, sitting in traffic? Do we really want to go back to having those packed calendars? We still have a lot of the same things. It's not like we lost our ability to Netflix or Peloton.
Right. That's right.
So it really is. Now, okay, you talk about the office space. I've driven by North Hills. I see this beautiful new building with the Advanced Auto Parts logo. You're moving the headquarters. Pre-COVID, it was a big announcement from, I believe it was Virginia, right down the road to North Carolina. Am I remembering correctly?
Yeah, that was last year that we announced we moved the headquarters, and then we are setting up. We have a beautiful building in North Hills, and we're going to use the space differently than I think we thought.
Yeah, I mean, are the blueprints changing now? I mean,
there are some people that do want to go back sooner. But obviously you want to keep social distancing, and you want to make sure, our priority is keeping people safe. But I do think we're going to use this space differently. I think it's going to be more about collaboration versus people being in an office every day and being seen. I just, and we're still working through what that looks like, but I'm actually excited because I think it's going to open up a lot of possibilities for us as a company. Think about, talent. You have all this talent that moves to Raleigh. Well, maybe they don't need to move to Raleigh. Maybe they can be virtual and they come to Raleigh for these engagement sessions or collaboration meetings that they need to have. Maybe you're not moving talent here when you have an open role. There's a lot of things I think that can potentially change. And if that's the case, your talent pool is enormous. I think it gives a lot of companies competitive, advantages. But I'm excited about the space. We toured it a couple weeks ago, and it looks great. And I do think it's going to have to morph a little bit based on, where the world is going.
Well, I don't work there. I shop there, but from an outside observer, with people like you in charge, this company just feels like it's set up for, many, many more years down the line. Your employees are just so lucky to have a role model like you, a manager like you. And I hope that as people, I hope almost that what you're doing, all the people that work for you, the other managers and the other HR executives, hopefully they don't leave. But if they do go on to other companies, they're going to then bring what you have taught them and bring that to other companies, and then train a whole new generation of people. And so the paying it forward of what you've done, you've really planted a seed that I think is going to just really grow and be so fruitful. And I thank you, because I feel like there's going to be a direct line between, the culture that you've created to help facilitate to something that any of us, whether it's the shopping experience or again, someone who you worked with or who worked for you, then go somewhere else. It's gonna connect. And so I'm just so grateful, and what a fantastic conversation. I think everyone here who's been listening has also really been enriched by your perspective, your expertise. Looks like we have a late question coming in here. How best can a Jewish employee handle when events are scheduled on a holiday?
I do that all the time. You have to tell them it's a Jewish holiday. You have to tell them it's a Jewish holiday that you observe and you'd love to attend. Can they move the event? I've asked that. And if they can't move the event, then you miss the event. I just think you have to tell it like it is. And then honestly, over time, I mean, what's happened with me is people become more educated around the Jewish holidays. And I mean, my assistant now puts it on my calendar for me, and she was putting things like, holidays that I don't necessarily celebrate on my, because in September, October, it's like once a week there's a holiday. We've kind of gone the other way of where they're so sensitive about it. I'm like, Simchat Torah, I'm good. I don't need to be out. But you just have to tell them. So, well,
Great.
Thank you, Jonah.
Is there a way to, thank you. Before we get people want to contact you, is there a good email for you if people want to reach out?
Yeah, sure. So I can give you my advance auto email. So it's natalie.rothman@advance-auto.com, or I'm on LinkedIn.
Great. Yes, no, thank you. I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's been a much more engaging interview than I've been doing in the past 6 to 8 weeks, and that I'll probably be doing over the next 3 weeks. This is now public knowledge, by the way. Trump, we know, is coming to North. You get used to this. Trump is coming to North Carolina Thursday, and now Kamala Harris just announced that she's coming to North Carolina.
Okay, we'll be ready. Well, they'll be in good hands with you, Jonah. So
Thank you. You got any questions you want me to ask them, by the way?
I'm sorry, what?
You got any questions for me to ask them, by the way?
Not that we can talk about while we're being recorded. So.
Nice. No, thank you for making time for us today. Thank you to Michael for putting this together. Thank you for the Federation. And if you don't mind, I'm going to give a little plug to some other programming that we have, including tonight, the Jewish Community Relations Council, part of the Federation. We are hosting a town hall, a chat with Congressman David Price tonight, where we're going to talk about national politics. We'll talk about Israel and anti-Semitism. He is the Democratic congressman serving much of our area. And then mark your calendars, October 26th, a one-on-one conversation with Governor Roy Cooper. Also to talk about issues that don't get talked a lot about on the trail, issues important to the Jewish community, like North Carolina's behind-the-scenes partnerships with the State of Israel, agriculture, R&D, pharmaceuticals, biotechnology, all sorts of different things. And we'll talk about other issues related to the election. So please join us, and we'll hand it back to you, Michael. If he's there, or anybody else. Am I wrapping this? I'm going to wrap. Thank you, everybody, so much again to our sponsors, to Natalie for joining us. It has really been a wonderful opportunity. Reminder, today's event has been brought to you by the Jewish Federation of Raleigh, Cary, Jewish Business Leaders Affinity Group. The JBL group is for Jewish business leaders who own or lead a business in the Raleigh area. Their goals are to identify and share with our community high-level speakers, meet virtually and in-person when possible for networking events, and to create a mentor-mentee program, among other possible community contributions. Should you have interest in any of these offerings, have a speaker suggestion, want to join the JBL group, or become a sponsor, please contact the group chairperson. His information will be shared with you by email after the webinar concludes. Thank you again. Have a wonderful Tuesday, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.